Hi, I'm Nick from EBC, and in this video I'm going to show you how to install our brand new range of high performance all stainless brake lines on this Suzuki Bandit. So what will you gain from installing braided brake lines? The answer is lots. Your brakes will become more positive and have a better feel. If you're upgrading to high performance brake pads and discs without also upgrading the braided lines, you're not unlocking the full potential and may not achieve the ultimate braking precision you're looking for. EBC's new all stainless high performance brake line kits are built right here in the UK, and every individual brake line is pressure tested after assembly. They also route identically to the originals and are guaranteed for life. Even if you have a brand new vehicle, since EBC's stainless steel lines never perish or corrode, there's no reason to wait till your old rubber lines perish before upgrading. At this sort of age, the original rubber lines will most likely have perished and be reducing braking performance, a prime candidate for a brake line upgrade then. The reason is simple. Your vehicle's original rubber brake lines have softer, weaker walls that are prone to ballooning. As you'd have guessed from the name, this is where the brake line actually blows up like a balloon when you brake. This makes your lever feel soft or long because a significant proportion of the brake lever travel is completely wasted by inflating the rubber brake lines with brake fluid. EBC high performance braided brake lines have an extremely rigid, armoured stainless steel exterior that doesn't allow the diameter of the line to change with fluid pressure. This resistance to expansion almost completely eliminates the ballooning phenomenon, and consequently all the brake fluid is transferred directly to where you need it, the brake caliper. Not only are rubber brake lines inferior from a performance perspective, over time the soft rubber perishes and can become damaged from road debris, meaning that rubber brake lines are actually a consumable item, needing to be replaced every few years to prevent further degradation in braking performance and to ensure the vehicle brake lines are properly maintained and safe. Now the existing lines are full of brake fluid, of course, which is nasty stuff. It will strip your paint and can't be mixed with oil when you take it to the tip. Now we could drain the whole system of brake fluid, fit new lines and refill and bleed the entire system. But it's time consuming, and due to the ABS pump on some modern bikes, it can sometimes be tricky to bleed a system once it's completely dry without professional equipment. But here we're going to be the quicker, if slightly messier option, where we always keep some brake fluid in the hydraulics. Now we're using a lift just to make filming that little bit easier, but you can of course do this sort of work on the ground. Just make sure you store your bodywork nice and safely away so you don't end up kicking it across the workshop floor, and look after your knees because you'll miss those when they're gone. Now, of course, it depends on what bike you've got as to exactly what bodywork you need to take off. The rule of thumb, though, is take off as much as you need so you don't end up working in tight spaces. And with that off, you get a good, clear view of the original brake line. So it's a great time to check that the old line and the new line are identical. Here's a top tip. You can also take a photograph of the routing of your existing brake line. That way you can remember how the lines went if in any doubt later on. Check your owner's manual to determine the type of fluid your vehicle uses. Some vehicles conveniently state the correct type of brake fluid on the top of the brake fluid reservoir. The majority of vehicles use DOT4 glycol-based fluid, but it's always best to double check it's the correct type. Don't forget that DOT3, 4 and 5.1 are made from the same basic stuff, glycol, and can be mixed only with other fluids of the same base. Some DOT5 fluids, however, are silicon-based and can't be mixed with any glycol fluids. Once you've chosen the correct type of brake fluid, you need to give some thought to what grade of fluid is most suitable for your riding style. If you ride your bike hard or do the occasional track day, you'll want to use a high-performance brake fluid such as EBC's BF 307 Plus fluid, which has a higher boiling point. The reason a high boiling point is desirable is because if your brake fluid boils, bubbles of gas form, and this gas is much more compressible than the surrounding fluid. The gas increases the overall compressibility of your brake fluid and results in a long and soft brake lever. Exactly the thing we're trying to prevent. Our recommendation would be don't skimp. Don't buy a cheap, low-quality brake fluid at this stage, or you risk counteracting the benefits of upgrading to braided lines in the first place. If you need help choosing the right grade of brake fluid, more information can be found at ebcbrakes.com. We've opted for EBC's premium spec .4 fluid, which is perfect for this bike, as a rider doesn't track the bike or drive it too hard. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to say next is absolutely critical. Never use brake fluid from opened containers. Every bottle of fluid is sealed airtight, and as soon as this seal is broken, water vapor from the surrounding atmosphere starts to mix in with the brake fluid. Excess water in your brake fluid is bad news, as it has much lower boiling point than the brake fluid itself. When this water in the fluid gets hot, it vaporizes and introduces gas into the hydraulic. For the same reasons we just spoke about, gas in the brake fluid is massively detrimental to braking performance, resulting in a long and soft brake lever. Now let's go back to fitting the new brake lines. Now I've lost count of how many reservoirs I've had to rescue because the screws holding the lid on have been stripped. As you can see, someone has butchered one of these screws in the past, so make sure you use the correct size and shape, and make sure there's no crud stopping the screwdriver seating properly. Bike reservoirs are small and need frequent checking to make sure they don't run dry. Store the screws safely, top up the fluid very carefully, and just place the cap back on for now. Working on the front lines first, I'm removing the hoses that connect to the hard lines, removing brackets as I go, and cracking off unions using the brake line spanners. I'm using bungs to stop too much fluid leaking out, and placing rags to catch as much fluid as possible. Now remove the banjo from the caliper using a ring spanner or socket. Now I can crack off the hoses from one side of the splitter. I've already compared the hoses on the bench, so I know which ones to use. I can feed the new hoses through the frame and down to the front caliper, taking great care to use the correct bolts and ensure the unions are in the correct orientation. Using the new copper washers between every sealing surface, I build the union up and using my fingers start screwing it back into the splitter. This avoids any chance of cross-threading. And do the same with the caliper union, making sure the new hose is routed correctly. Now I can connect the hoses to the hard lines leading to the ABS pump, tightening carefully as I can't use the torque wrench here. Time to torque up the first two banjos. Remember, always use a torque wrench where you have access for a socket. And now for the other side. I've placed rags to catch brake fluid, and I'm cracking off the master cylinder banjo and giving it a very careful wash down as I go. New line installed with the new copper washers and torqued up straight away. Then the splitter connection, again taking great care to make sure the unions are in the correct orientation. And again torquing up to the specified torques. Once all the front lines have been installed, I can start bleeding the system. Brake fluid should be changed a maximum of every 2 years anyway, so this is a good opportunity to flush out that old used brake fluid. I've filled the master cylinder and I'm allowing the new fluid to seep through the hardline connector. It minimises the air in the system. Crack off the bleed nipple, fit the vacuum bleeder to the bleed nipple and pump it to create a vacuum. Then crack off the bleed nipple and let the vacuum pull the old fluid and any air through. Retightening the nipple and can keep repeating this until the air stops coming through. Master cylinders on bikes tend to be small, so keep checking the fluid level. Don't let it run dry. Once there are no more bubbles in the fluid, you should be good to go. Make sure you retighten the bleed nipples and refit any covers. You'll need to do this for both front calipers if you have two. Now do one last check of the fluid level and refit the master cylinder cover and wash it down. Do one final check of the front and rear lines to check for any leaks and make sure all the routing is correct and the brackets are refitted properly. Pump the brake lever and check it's firm without too much travel. If you fitted new pads or discs in the same brake job, it's likely the lever will be slightly spongy anyway until the new pads and discs mate up nicely. Make sure to follow the correct procedure when bedding in your new brakes. You'll find all the information you need at the following link. No leaks? Great. Now it's time for that road test. On a quiet piece of road or at low speed, apply the brakes and check that you have a nice firm lever and that the bike's brakes are working as expected. Again, if new pads and discs have been fitted, the lever feel will get better and better as the brakes bed down. If everything feels responsive and solid, great work, you successfully completed your install and should have a noticeably improved brake lever feel, especially under hard braking events. Your work isn't quite done yet though. After driving a few hundred miles, have a good look around the bike and inspect the brake lines and fittings for any sign of leakage. Now you know how to do it and which lines to buy. Fit them now and enjoy all the benefits straight away.